guys, Codepunk here. Welcome to another tutorial. Today we're going to learn how we can develop an application on Express. Express is the most widely used framework of Node.js to develop applications on the internet. There are a lot of frameworks on Node.js to develop applications. So today we're going to learn how we can create application with Express.js. Now this tutorial is for beginners. So if you do not know anything about expressjs, you only know JavaScript and a little bit of Node.js and npm, so you know how you can install packages and something like that, and you want to learn expressjs, this tutorial is for you. This is the expressjs official website, expressjs.com, where you can see all of the guide, getting started, and API reference. If you want to go to advanced topics, you can see them here. So we'll just close this up and come over here. We have a folder named Express, and I am in that folder right now. And I also have that folder open in the VS Code right now in my code window. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to install Express, right? So first of all, I'm just going to create that package.json file. And for that, I'm just going to run npm init, and it is going to ask me a couple of questions. I'm just going to make it a little bit big over here so you guys can see, right? Okay, so this is going to ask me what's the package name. I'm going to say app, or we can say my app, and what's the version, and I'll just press enter, use the default, just let enter, right? Okay, there we go. Now we have a simple package.json file in a folder over here. Just gonna make this big, right? First, I'm going to create another file called index.js in which we're going to write all of our code. And over here, I'm just going to run a command and clear this bit up. So I'll run the command npm I, which means install Express. It will install Express package into our package.json into a project over here. Okay. Now, if we check the package.json file, we will see the Express in our dependencies. So now we're ready to write our code. First of all, I'm just going to import the Express in a constant over here, require Express, and I'll create another constant, and I'll just call the Express and save that into the constant called app. And at the bottom, I'll just write another line, app.listen, and we need to pass a port over here. Now this has to be a free port in your machine that the Express app is going to run into, right? So I'll just pass the 3000 port over here. So now we just need to run the command to run our Express app, right? We can just simply come and write node and pass it that index.js file. And this will simply run the code in our file and start the Express app. Now it won't give you any output right now because we haven't write that over here. Now if I come over here and navigate to localhost 3000, and we'll just see an error called cannot get. Now this means that our application is running, but we don't have any routes over here. So we'll just come over here and write our first route, and I'll say app.get. So this is the syntax over here. We'll just call the app, and you'll call the get method on that. And in the first parameter, I'll just explain this method a bit later in the next section of this video. So we just want to run the app right now. So I'll pass in handler over here. This will accept 2 parameters. We'll also go into details about these parameters. And we'll just call the rest.send, hey, my app is running. Okay. So I'm just going to come over here and reload. Now this is still not going to work because we need to restart the server. Whenever we change our code, we need to restart our server. So we need to run node index.js again. We come over here and reload. Now we see, hey, my app is running. We're going to make this process a little bit smoother by coming over to package.json and write a start command in the script section over here. Okay. We'll just say node index.js. Now what this means is whenever we want to restart our app, we'll just come over here and write npm start. This will automatically run our start script and just run a file. But still, this is not going to solve our problem of restarting the code ever and ever again whenever we change the code, right? So I'll just change this to welcome to my app. And if I come over here and reload, it's still saying, hey, my app is running. Now I need to restart this, right? The solution to our problem, the nodemon package. That is a separate package. We can just come and write the command npm I, and we'll say nodemon. And one more thing we'll pass over here is the -- save -dev parameter. Now what this will do, it will install that package in our dev dependencies over here. You see it appeared. Now what this specifies is it is only required whenever we're doing the development of this app. It will not install this package if we're just deploying this to production. The only simple next step that we want to do is right now is just change this node to nodemon. Now I'm just going to close this terminal right now over here, and in our code window, I'm going to open a terminal, and in that terminal, I'm going to write npm stop. Okay, you see a little bit of output over here. Now this is the nodemon output, right? So now if I come over here and whenever I change the code, this is my app, and when I hit save, it automatically says restarting due to changes. Now we do not need to restart every time we change our code. So if I check right now, we'll say welcome to my app. So now we have our application set up. We need to see how we can set up different routes in our application, so we can perform different kind of operations, right? You have seen that we have already written a route over here with the slash that serves to the main slash route over here. We just type in that and it will just send the output. So let's see how this works. Okay, you can just create another route, app.get, and the first parameter is the path of that route. So we can say /contact, and in the next parameter, we need to pass a function. Now that function will accept two objects. One is the request and one is the response. Now we are going to get into detail about these objects in the video later, and we'll see how these objects give us the functionality to expand and scale our app. But right now, we just need these objects to send the response, right? So this is the request object. It has the details about all of our requests, whatever data that we are sending, that we will see later in the video. Right now, we can only send the response by accessing the send method in the response object, right? So we can say contact us. Now, if I go to our /contact page, we'll see contact us. Now, this method .get is not the only method for defining routes in Express. We also have other methods called post, put, and delete. So if I come over here and I say post and I say /create, and the same as the get method above, we pass a function, a callback function, which accepts two parameters, right? We say res.send and create the post. To test this, I cannot send a post request from my browser. For that, I have an extension called tabbed postman. Now this is the same as postman, but it's in the tab of the browser. So I can just type in the URL over here, localhost 3000. I'll say HTTP, and we need to choose post, right? And we type in that path over here, /create. Okay, there it is, our response, create the post. So in this way, we can also have another method called put. Now, put is used to update a lot of objects. If we have in our database or something like that, if you want to update anything, you have to use the put method. So we say update, right? And same as the other ones, we pass in that callback. We say res.send, updating the post. So let's try, say update, and there it is. That is the put request made to our route over here. Okay. Now, if we also want to see which route is hit, we can also say console.log updating, right? Now, whenever we send a request to this route, you'll see an output over here. We also have another method called app.delete. Now, whenever you want to put a delete operation in our app that user can send that request to, we use the delete method. Let's just pass the same callback over here, which accepts those two parameters, and we send the response deleting the post. Let's also test that in our postman over here. I'll set the type to delete and send. There we go. Now let's test it by changing that to put and making a delete request. Okay, you see we have an error called cannot delete/delete. Says like it cannot use that method in this route. Okay, now that we have learned how route works in expressjs and how we can put different methods for routes over here, we can see how we can accept parameters in web application of Express. What if I come over here and I want to get the post, some kind of post object in my database or my application, and I want to fetch that, or any kind of user, right? So we'll just write a route for if we want to fetch a user with ID 2 from our database. So this will go like this. We have to type the path/user and another slash, and wherever we want to accept the parameter, we have to type colon and that parameter name ID, and simply pass that callback method for the route, and we'll say rest.send fetching the user for you. So we come over here and say /user/23, and it says fetching the user for you. But we also want to access this ID in our method over here. Now that comes in the request object. Request object is very useful over here. It contains all the information about our request. So we can say rec.params. Now all of the parameters, they lie in the params object. So whenever I log this, let's reload this, and you see that object, it has ID with 23 in it. Okay, so we can say plus user for you, user with ID plus rec.params.id for you. Now reload this and we see fetching the user with ID 23 for you. What if we want to accept two parameters, right? So we have a comment on a post, but we also want to send the post ID. So we say post/ID/comment, or we say comment ID. Let's say request and response. Okay, so we say rest.send post, and the post ID is rec.params.id, and comment, we can say rec.params.comment ID. Let's test this out. So there it is, post, and let's give the post ID of 2 and comment of 34. There we go. We can access that in request.params object. Now that we have learned how we can accept different parameters in our application, now we can see how advanced routing works. So first of all, there's a concept called multiple callbacks like these for different routes. Let's come over here and let's say we have this user with parameter ID route over here, and we can come over here and pass in another callback over here separated by. Now we have 3 parameters for get. It will accept also another parameter called next. So the reason of this is we can put multiple callback methods inline and they will be executed one by one. So whenever we come over here to /user/ID, first this callback will be executed. So we say callback 1 executing, and then this callback will be executing. Callback 2 executing. I'll just remove this one. So if I come over here and I say user/23, now we see that callback 1 is being executed, but it's also infinitely loading, and it also not executing the callback 2. Now the reason for this is whenever we use multiple callbacks like this in chaining, we need to call the next method at the end of that so it can call the next one. Now if we reload user/23, it says callback 1 executing, then callback 2. Now if I come over here and create a third callback, okay, console.log third, so callback 3 executing, calling the next over here, there it is. So we have a third callback now, And in the first callback, we console.log and pass the handle to the second callback. And in the second callback, we have sent the response and then did the next one. So this proves that we can do a lot of operation also after sending the response in our application. So you can chain as many methods as you want. Talking about routes in Express, we can also chain multiple routes if they are to the same path. What that means is if you have multiple routes to the same path like this, and we have two routes. First one is a get route to the /user with ID parameter, and next one is a put route /user to the ID parameter. Now we can chain these routes by using the app.route method. What this will accept is only one parameter, the path. So we pass the path over here. Next, we chain the method that we want to handle. So we can just come over here and take that callback and pass that in, and this will mean the same thing. We can also take this route's callback and put that over here in the put object, to the put method, and pass that over here. This will have the same result as the previous one. That is working. Now we do not have a response.send over here, so fetching user will just give us fetching user. You only had a console.log. Okay, so we have our application in Express, and we have a lot of entities like hosts, right? And we have users, and we have comments, and a lot of other things too. And so if we have this kind of structure for our application, we have to put all of our routes handling the posts, users, and comments in one file. Now that is going to be a lot of messy code that we cannot handle in the future. So Express gives us with the .router method that we can use to separate our code of routes in different files. Now how that works is we can simply, let's create a structure for our application, right? Let's create a new folder over here called routes. And in that folder, I'm just going to create a new file called user.js. Now this file will contain all the routes for our user. So I'm just going to cut these routes from here and write new routes over here. So to do this, we need to import the Express over here, require Express, and we also need to get a express.router and call that and save that in over here. Now, all those routes that we had in index.js for user, we can define those over here by calling router.route /user/id, and we can say .get and pass in that callback. You can say rest.send fetching user with ID parents.id, and we can also write another route, but let's attach these routes over here to the Express. We need to write exports over here and export this router object from here, and over here we need to import those routes. So we can say user routes equal to require, and we can say ./routes/user.js. Now this will import this router object from this user file in our user routes constant over here. So we can come down and call app.use, and we can simply say / where we want to mount those routes, right? And we can pass those routes over here. Now if we go to this page, we'll simply see that output that we have written over there. The main advantage of mounting the routes like this is you can simply come over here and omit this from here, and wherever you want to mount all those routes, you can pass that over here. So in future, if you want to change the URLs for user, all of the URLs for updating and fetching and all of those URLs, like put over here, the patch, right, request, and say put request.send updating user, right? And we also have a delete route like this. And if you want to update those routes in the future, you can just simply change the mount point over here wherever you want to. So we can say /roles or something like that, and it will be updated in an instant. We say roles. There we go, fetching user with ID 23. Okay, so now we know how to write routes and group them together and make a great structure for our application. And we also know how to accept parameters in our application. Now we'll learn about the middlewares. What are middlewares? Middlewares are functions that have access to the objects in our application that request and response, but they get executed before any process. So you just inject them right in between before any request processing. So how do we write the middleware? The middleware is something like you call the app, the Express app that you have initialized, and call the use method on it. Just like we have called the user routes. This is also used to mount the routes at a point. So we will use it to mount the middleware. So now we pass in the function that will accept request, response, and next. And this is our basic global middleware in Express. So we'll just write console.log middleware being executed. And don't forget to call next at the end of your middleware callback function, because this will pass the execution to the next callback, whichever the route is. Let's save and test that out. So whenever we go to any path in our application, we will see this log in our terminal, because this is a global level middleware. There are also other kind of middlewares like route level middlewares or router level middleware. So what can we use the middlewares for? These global middlewares, we can use them to put something in the request object and pass them to the other routes. We can do global execution over here. So whatever code we want to run before any callback method, we can use this middleware. So Express also has built-in middlewares called cookie parser, but they are also available as separate module. Express has built-in middleware for body parser, which was separately available before in the previous versions of Express. Now Express has this included in the package. We will learn about them in the next sections. So right now, just for the example that we can use the middleware for any other thing, call like we can put something in request object, something like my data, and we pass in hello world. In the user routes, we can access that my data over here. So we can also say over here, request.mydata plus this. So reload, you see, we are passing that information via middleware to all other routes. Now we know about the middlewares that they run before each method or route that we have written in Express. And what we just wrote is an application level middleware. Is also called global level middleware. What if we want to run our middleware just for only one route or two routes? We can define that middleware over here in a constant, or just declare it as a function like a normal middleware, and we can inject this middleware in the route just by passing it before passing the callback. So we will just pass that middleware over here called middleware, right? We can also call this user middleware, and we'll call next in there. And just to test this out, let's put a log in there, user middleware called. Okay, now we see in the log that the user middleware is being called. We can also access the request object, the params in there. So if we say, now if we reload, we can see that we got the ID2 in here. So what if we want to restrict the user with ID2 access to our application? We can just put here if request.params.id equals to 2. We can send the response .send. We can say user unauthorized. So reload, it says user unauthorized. But also we got an error because we are passing the execution to the next callback. But we do not want to do this if we are using the middleware, or we can just simply return from here and there will be no error. So if we test with another user, we can see that we can access our application. So this is a route level middleware. Okay, so now we have a good understanding what is the middleware and how to write global and route level middleware in our application. Let's get to these two objects, request and response. What is the power that they give us in our application and how we can control that power. So I will use the root level route for this testing. So let's come back to the home page, and I'll just identify the main important properties of request object first. First of all, the request object contains the body, whatever the data we send to our application. So we can always access that in request.body. If I reload, we get an undefined. It is because the request.body is used whenever we send some data from the form or from an AJAX request or some kind of request to our server with the JSON data. But we also have to use an express built-in middleware for the data to access in the request.body. We also have other properties like request.hostname. This will give us the host name of our request. So we're requesting from localhost. And we also have the IP. So if we reload, we'll get the IP. Because we are on the localhost, we don't get the IP. Okay. We also have the method, whatever method we are requesting on. If we reload, we're currently on get. If we are on post, it will put the post over here. And we also have the request.original URL. So if we reload, we see a slash over here. And if we put this in a middleware over here, and we go to the user /2 or 3, we see that we get the whole original URL. So we also have request.params that you're already aware of. We get the params in there. And we also have request.path, which is also like the original URL, and it returns as the path of current URL. Next, we have the response object. Now, this is very important because we send the response using this object. So what other methods beside send we have in this object? First of all, we have the status. So how can we send the status from server? We can simply do response.send status, and we can say 500. That is an error code. We reload, it says internal server error. The reason this is giving us an error is because we are sending the response after this error. What if we want to send the response with this error? We can say something like res.status and pass in the status and chain the response that we want to send with that status. So that lets us send the response with the status. So if we do an AJAX request to this endpoint, we'll always get the code 500 with this response. We also have a .json method through which we can send the JSON response. We can say res.json and pass in any object that we want to send, like hello in world. See, there we go. We have the JSON now. And we can also redirect to any other URL in our application. We can do that by using the redirect method of response. We can say /user/23, and this will redirect us to the user 23 whenever we open the home page. We also have one other method, .render, that we will discuss this in the next section of our tutorial, which is template engines. This is used to render a template. Okay, so now we know how can we access the request and response object and use them and use their power in conjunction to create an application that is so much powerful in Express. So right now, the problem is the only thing that whenever we have to create an application, we do not always send the text response like this. We use HTML or other file formats to serve on the internet. So how do we send the HTML response over here? You know, when we gotta send a lot of HTML data and we cannot send that in the JS files over here. That is going to make our code a lot messier. So for this, we have template engines that we can integrate into Express. Express is very flexible about templating engines, so we can integrate many kind of template engines in Express. Okay, we have two main templating engines that we can integrate into our Express application to serve HTML, not just static HTML, but dynamic HTML based on params, the logic, and everything. So first is the EJS, and the other one is the PugJS. We can use both of them, but right now we'll use EJS because it is easier to use in my case. And the Pug, it is also easier to use, and you don't have to write a lot of HTML tags because Pug has its own templating. Let me show you. You can just simply write code like this, and this will convert into HTML like this. You don't have to write tags explicitly. So right now we will use EJS. How do we integrate EJS into our Express application? Not just EJS, but any templating engine. So for this instance, I will stop the terminal and clear this bit out. First of all, I'm going to install EGS in our directory. This will add EGS in our dependencies. After that, I'm going to run my Express server back, so npm start. And the last step is to tell Express to use EGS as its templating engine. For that, I will simply come over here, and when I am initializing the app of Express, I will just use the app.set method. We will set the view space engine property to EGS. Now this will tell the Express to use EGS as templating engine. Okay, now we are ready to use EGS. Just one last step, we need to create our EGS file. So for that, I'm going to create a folder called views, and in that folder, I'm going to create a file index.ejs. In that index.ejs file, I'm just going to create a simple HTML document that is going to say my application in the tab, and that will print an h1 with welcome to Express. So to serve this EGS file, we simply need to put res.render and pass in our EGS file name. Now, if I go to our main page, this will render that EGS template. Now, we only have a static HTML in our template. What if we want to send some kind of dynamic data from our application to the front end? We can simply pass that data in our object over here. Let's put in something like title. Let's say welcome to Express. We can render that title over here by using EGS templating. EGS is very easy to learn, and you can simply learn it by going to their documentation. But I'm going to tell you some basics of it. So you can simply write angle bracket and use percentage and close that tag. So this is the basic EGS tag for writing any kind of JavaScript expression. But if you want to output any kind of thing from JavaScript expression, you are going to write a simple assignment operator with the opening tag over here, and you're going to use that name over here as a variable. So if we reload right now over here, you see it's the same output. And if I change this output, welcome to Express, using EGS, and I reload, there you go. But if we do not pass this information and reload, we simply get an error because it says title is not defined. To dodge this error, what if we don't have this information and sometimes we're passing it and sometimes we're not? So to dodge this error, just simply prepend your variable with locals dot. So we access that variable in the locals object, and that always exists, so we don't get an error. Now if we pass in the title, we say welcome and reload, we get that. Now let's see how do we handle form data in our Express application. So for this, we'll also use our user routes. Let's create a simple mechanism or simple portion where we can create users and delete them and view how many users we have. So for this, I'm just going to create a users array over here. And in that array, we'll just have an ID of any user and the name. So I'm just going to name my user John Doe, and another user, let's say Mike. Right? So for this, let's create another file in our views. And let's name that file users.ejs. And in that file, I'm also going to create a simple document, and I'm going to put users in the title. Let's write a simple route for our main index users. So we'll write router.get / and we'll write a handler for that, callback. And this handler will render that template that we just created. We named that users. So if we go to /users, we'll see that template, but we don't see any output because we don't have any HTML in that body. So we'll also pass the users array that we just created. Okay, so in the template, we can loop through that users array by using the locals and call those users and call for each method on that user object or array and use the user here. And let's close that template literal over here. So we can write HTML down there. So we simply have h3 and we output each user name over here, user.name. But if we go to /user right now, we'll see the current users that we have just in our array. let's suppose this array is our database because we are not doing any database connection right now. So we have just created a temporary variable to save the data. Let's create another template where we will create the users. So let's name our file users underscore create.js, and let's write a basic HTML in that. Then let's hit the title with create user. Let's create a simple form over here, and this form will post to /users/create, or simply /users. So let's write that route for /users so we can create that data. Okay, so we have the route over here. We can just simply name this route because we are going to change the methods over here. Let's say .get. Okay. So if we post to this route, we are going to simply create the user and append that to our array over here. For that, let's come back to our template over here and let's create an input called text, and let's name it name, and also create a submit button time equals to submit, and let's name it create. So let's create another route, router.get/create, and we render our newly created template for users to create that. Go to users/create, we get that, right? Let's complete our form by adding the method of post. Okay, so now let's see if we are getting the data in our Express application. So I'm going to reload just once, and I'm going to add Mark as a user. When I click create, it says undefined, and it's also loading. So we will have to overcome this error that we are not receiving any data when we're posting a form. So for that, Express provides us with a simple middleware, a built-in middleware that we will have to put in to receive that form data. And that is, if we come to our main file, index.js, where we have initialized our server, we will have to add that global middleware by calling app.use. And in Express, it provides us the URL encoded, and we also have to give it the option extended true. So it's simply a body parser. Right now, our server is restarted, and now if we submit our forms data, we will see that data in our console. And now we just simply have to put that in our array over here and send a simple response to our front end over here. Let's get our last user and increment that ID. So new ID will be users. Get users.length -1 and get that ID and add 1 to it. We'll say users.push, and we'll push in a new object with new ID, and name will be request.body.name. We will just redirect them back to /users so they can see that newly created user. Let's hit create, and you see we got Mark in there. And if we go back and create another user, John2, create, there we go, with another user. Okay, so now we know about how we can handle forms. Now we need to simply know the last thing, that there's a lot common in the servers, that what if we want to serve a static file? A static file means that you just have a file and you just want to serve that without processing anything or any kind of request over here using the server. We just simply want to, if user access that file using relative path from over here, you just serve that. So for that, we'll just create a public folder over here to serve those files. In the main file, you can simply use a middleware for that, app.use, and you can use the built-in middleware express.static and pass in the directory name from which you want to serve those files. So we'll pass in public. So right now, if we create any kind of file in public, or any JPG, any PDF, any kind of file over there, we say for .html, and in that HTML, let's say we have the one day you are in a black hole, right? So if we just simply go and write over here for .html, you see that file over here. We don't have any route for it. We don't have any middleware or any kind of template rendering for it. It is simply being paused from over here to over here, just served as a static file. The last thing you need to know about Express before you go is how do you debug Express. Okay, for that, you simply need to set the debug to Express all, which is asterisk. This will tell the Express to debug everything in the data, in the routes that they're coming and they're processing. So, and you just need to write the command that you use to run the Express application, the nodemon index.js. I'll just hit enter. So now, whenever we do any kind of request to our Express, you will see that it is simply logging each and everything, whichever middleware is being used, whichever route is being used, and whichever view is being served. If we go to /44, it says that it is simply, it has got the request and it is dispatching. The query was that, and it has served the static file. So I hope by watching this tutorial, you have learned the basics and you are able to scale yourself up by just going in and using the advanced guide of Express and scaling your application. Now you will be able to develop amazing kind of backends and frontends application. Thank you so much guys for watching this tutorial. Don't forget to subscribe and press that bell icon so you get all the notifications about our code tutorials. And don't forget to tune in for our live stream each week.